I'm Dean Walker, and welcome to the Poetry of Predicament podcast, a podcast for people brave enough to face humanity's challenges and problems, and most importantly, our numerous predicaments. The Poetry of Predicament is a podcast meant to inspire us to bring forth grace, beauty, and connection with the web of life in the face of a predicament-laden world. In this episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, we're going to hear an inspiring update from Southern Oregon, where we've just experienced in the past couple of weeks devastating firestorm. The community has rallied in an extraordinary way. If you've been looking for something to counter desperation in these times, listen up to this particular episode. Hi there. This is Dean Walker from the Poetry of Predicament podcast and also Living Resilience Deep Academy, an online series of video learning series that are meant to assist people in sense making and finding some kind of sanity and resources and possibility in these extraordinary times. You may be used to me interviewing folks on the Poetry of Predicament and so on, and that'll continue. But today I want to read a piece from the website Medium that hosts so many different kinds of writers. There's a woman that is an editor for Medium that lives in the Ashland, Oregon area, and I live about 10 miles away in Medford, Oregon. And we, of course, in this September of 2020, we've just been facing a firestorm here in this area just a couple of weeks ago, which is called it was first called the Glendower Fire and soon became known as the Almeda Fire. And again, it was a firestorm. It just happened so unbelievably quickly. In less than a day, it was devastating to local communities of Talent and Phoenix, which are more or less right next door to where I live and where the author of this piece lives. So one thing that we're emphasizing an awful lot, especially in the introductory levels of this work of Living Resilience Deep Academy, which again is a series of online learning video series that people can first take part in and participate in, and then hopefully come together with others in support group fashion to deepen the learning and the experience in their own families and their own relationships. And I am meaning to include this in the self-regulation and co-regulation and resilience skills portion of this body of work. We've talked an awful lot in the various class sessions, if you will, the video class sessions, about self-regulation and co-regulation. And it's just so darn conceptual if you're not in some sort of high stress environment, if you don't have some sort of disaster level stressor going on, it's awfully hard to really get engaged with the whole idea of self-regulation, bringing yourself back to a functional state of being, hopefully an optimal or preferable state of being, much less co-regulation with others. I mean, it's a pleasant feeling, and again, it's kind of an abstraction. But for these folks, it's no abstraction. For my experience, and I was lucky enough to not lose my home in this firestorm, but there are literally thousands of people in this small Rogue Valley area of Southern Oregon that have lost their homes or have had lost their business or lost their jobs, or you get the idea. So I just wanted to share this with you because it's an extraordinary brief story of people coming together in some way to support one another, support their fellow Rogue Valley residents who are in such need, and in the briefly after the firestorm, literally within days of the firestorm that is the Almeda fire. So I'll be shifting now to sharing screen with you, and you can read along with me as I read this article from Medium. How Southern Oregon communities are working to build back better after the Almeda fire. This is from Natalie Holmes, who is herself an editor at Medium, and again, Rogue Valley, in fact, an Ashland resident, I believe. In the face of devastation, locals mobilized to coordinate both immediate and long-term security for those most affected by the blaze. So this is the Ashland Bike Brigade that we're about to hear about. On the morning of September 9th, a grass fire in Oregon's Rogue Valley was fueled by strong winds and soon turned catastrophic, tearing through the towns of Phoenix and Talent, destroying over 2,300 residences, many of which were in mobile home parks, housing the elderly and low-income and migrant workers. The morning after, while the fires continued to burn, members of the local community began to take stock. The devastation was overwhelming. In the words of volunteer firefighter Julie Grable, "You think it won't happen here. You've seen the footage of Paradise or Santa Rosa or Mendocino, and you think, oh, those poor people. It all happens so fast. The temptation was to shut down and succumb to the shock. Instead, a group formed in neighboring Ashland and started to figure out how to help. Following a reconnaissance bike ride through the ashen remains of Talent, Post-Growth Institute co-founder Donnie Maclurcan, who works to mobilize communities by matching offers and needs, posted on a local Facebook group. He put out a call for volunteers to bike in essentials to people in Talent who were unable to leave their homes. The water and power supplies were off, leaving vulnerable residents stranded. Almost all vehicle access was blocked. With that call out, the Ashland Bike Brigade was formed and volunteers gathered food and water to deliver to those in need. That day, 8 cyclists delivered over 50 gallons of water to stranded residents in Talent. The crew also distributed food and took photos of properties for people who evacuated and did not know the fate of their home. Less than 24 hours later, the Bike Brigade's numbers had swollen to more than 100 people, including some who had lost their own homes. Volunteers were out delivering water, food, information, and support to people who had remained in or returned to fire-ravaged Talent. Reporting on the day, Donnie wrote, "Like yesterday, we encountered people without any electricity, water, phone, internet, or means to leave town. Often elderly and or with a disability, and without friends, family to assist. Some people said we were the first people they'd seen in days." Braving toxic smoke conditions, the group reached an estimated 95% of the 2,000 homes that remained standing, and thanks to a group of volunteers on dirt bikes, were able to get to people in the most remote and hard to access areas. The following day, after an overwhelming response to calls for water donations, the Ashland Bike Brigade was ready to continue their work. But by this time, the smoke was at hazardous levels and local authorities were restricting access to neighboring towns. 2 local men, LeBeau Potgeiter, and Derek Sherrill managed to negotiate truck access, and with the help of many volunteers, the group was able to deliver 300 gallons of water to the Rogue Action Center in Talent, a makeshift hub set up after the organization's headquarters in neighboring Phoenix burned down. Soon after, resident Sarah Shaw secured a generator, which was swiftly trucked in too. I'm scrolling back down to show you the hazardous air condition that's in the graphic that's there on the screen. Ashland Fire Department from showing 492, which is extremely high. There has been talk of there being a maximum number of 500. I'm unclear how high the actual hazardous air measure goes. But needless to say, we had many days over 500, no matter what the measure was. I'm sure it was considered dangerous and extremely high. Meanwhile, the volunteer database swelled. The group's text alert system was established and their efforts made the national news. Each day brought more momentum, more mobilization, and more impact. On September 14th, another 300 gallons of water was delivered, and a local woman offered to donate an entire Shasta water truck to continue the water deliveries. 2 powerful generators were secured and delivered to Jackson County Fire District 5, who were still without electricity. That's the Jackson County Fire Station number 5 that was without electricity. Water donations continued to pour in, including a massive donation from local bakery Mix Bake Shop, and from all over the world via the newly created Amazon wish list, Almeda Fire Relief Support for Oregon. A team of volunteers started databasing and coordinating volunteer requests for the Ashland Bike Brigade, as well as mapping the inventory of needs across the entire valley's distribution centers. The first call from the database was for volunteers to run security shifts at a local Mexican restaurant that was coordinating monetary donations between midnight and 6 a.m. that night in toxic smoke. All the shifts were filled in 20 minutes. Local handyman John Palumbo and Atlas Newman of the Rogue Volunteer Initiative assembled over 170 builders to help rebuild residences, while Donnie and LeBeau pulled together 50 partners from state senators to donors, property owners, town planners, town mayors, disaster relief specialists, equity and diversity workers, to educators and builders, for a hybrid Zoom and in-person meeting to advance an idea to create equitable, sustainable, community and family-owned housing using refurbished RVs, buses, shipping containers, and tiny houses, which later became the Rogue Valley Homes and Shelter Relief Initiative. The buy-in was incredible, said Donnie. I've never seen such an amazing pledge of resources. On September 14th, the electricity came back on in Talent. The brigade matching database and alert system now fully functional, thanks to the hard work of PGI member Danny Leonardo and land stewardship educator Janine Moy. People's offers and needs were being matched more efficiently than ever. A local named Tyler gave 2 bikes to a family whose cars had been destroyed by fire, among numerous other acts of generosity. Local city councilor Julie Akins reignited her efforts to convert drivable, barely used buses into tiny homes. Offers of land, labor, and capital poured in for the Rogue Valley Home and Shelter Relief Project, including fiscal sponsorship by the MRG Foundation. Then Tom Llewellyn from Shareable called to announce the donation of 10,000 N95 masks. When communities mobilize in this way, it reminds us that there need not be barriers to alleviating people's basic needs. That same evening, Donnie wrote, "Oftentimes I find myself surrounded by the kind of people that remind me that anything's possible. Just by the very nature of their vision and can-do attitude, tonight was one of those times. I've never felt so exhausted, yet I've never felt so hopeful that in the wake of devastation of the Almeda fire, we can provide shelter in the near term and rebuild permanent housing in the long term that is safe, sustainable, and family and community owned, all through an equity-centered process." And then there's so much that is invisible and will remain invisible. The stories of hope, tragedy, perseverance, and the mundane that will never be told during this time or otherwise. The stories of the caregivers, the educators, the single parents, the undocumented migrants, the BIPOC community leaders, the behind the scene weavers, the social media managers, the city administrators, the social workers, the assessors, and so many more. These stories may not be told, but they are part of the mythic fabric that binds us. They exist in a space we can reach by merely closing our eyes, connecting with our hearts, and remembering that we are all one. If you'd like to contribute to the ongoing efforts to support those affected by the Almeda fire, you can donate to the Rogue Valley Relief Fund or the GoFundMe pages for families and individuals who are struggling. Find out more about the Post-Growth Institute that was mentioned in this article on their website. And of course, all of these links are on the original Medium article that you've been watching scroll by. And you can look that up in the link that's in the show notes of this particular podcast episode. And there, of course, is the signature of the author of this article, Natalie Holmes. And you can also find more information about her if you follow the links to this article and beyond. Thank you for listening. This has been a remarkable example of a community coming together in extraordinary ways. And, it's for the collapse-aware community that is often the audience to this podcast, we can get pretty jaded. It can be it can come down to a very judgmental atmosphere against expressions of what can sometimes be called hopium, that we dare not try and express any kind of hope or any kind of positive news about people trying to stand together and support one another in the face of untold number of global scale and very local stressors. This is an example of those kind of people coming together, doing what they can, doing an extraordinary job of bringing a quality, deep quality of relatedness and quality of the actual efforts that were expressed and are being expressed into the future here. This is a shining example, in my estimation, of a community coming together when it's needed most. So my thanks to everyone that is mentioned in this article and all that are implied in the Rogue Valley to have this kind of extraordinary expression be a part of our world together. And thank you for watching.